Most of the people in Pine Lake are white.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
How many seats do you think House Republicans can pick up?
Oh, they're somewhere between 15 and 70.
The Republicans that want to criminalize women's health care.
This decision must not stand!
The solution is to recognize the policy has failed and to change the policy.
Donald Trump will do anything. There's no dumpster dirty enough that he won't play in order to get himself out of liability.
If you're the president of the United States, you can declassify just by saying it's declassified, even by thinking about it.
Former President Trump there reacting to the New York Attorney General's lawsuit against him and his business. Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Robert Costa, coming to you from our Washington, D.C. bureau. As this week nears a close, the former president's legal challenges, they remain front and center. And today we'll discuss the political implications of this blizzard of legal news. Recall, it was just months ago there seemed to be just kind of a drip of developments on the Trump legal front. But now, weeks after the FBI searched Trump's Florida home in August, that drip has turned into a daily onslaught of twists and turns for the former president. And recent days have been a reminder of the sprawling and complicated nature of what Trump is facing as he teases a political comeback. Joining us to discuss all this are two of the best political minds at CBS News, political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns and political director Fin Gomez. So good to have you both with us. Fin, we'll begin with you. When you think back to this week and recent days and all of these Trump legal developments, as political director at CBS News, what's your assessment about whether the Trump legal news moves the political needle just weeks ahead of the midterm elections?
Well, Bob, Trump is still the dominant figure in the Republican Party, and he's still having an impact. Doesn't move the political needle. It's still a little early to say. Even though he's become the subject of all these investigations, there's been a lot of attention on these investigations. It hasn't really impacted his standing in the Republican Party. It stayed basically the same at the same level since earlier this summer. But so far, there are a lot of headlines, and there's also a lot of just a sort of a wait-and-see approach, if you will, from the Republican Party on just how impactful this will be 47 days away from now.
That's a smart point, Fin. And Caitlin, you've been on the road covering candidates who were recently in Kansas, covering issues like abortion rights. And even in a ruby red state like Kansas, it's not Trump that's on everybody's mind all the time. There are other issues like abortion rights, like the economy.
Yeah, I mean, I think heading into this election, we're really seeing kind of a tale of two elections. You talk to Democrats, and it's abortion is the driving factor that they think has changed the dynamics of this race. You talk to Republicans in same campaigns who say, no, it's the inflation and the economy that still remain. And that bears out in our polling, too. And so you kind of have this dynamic where people are kind of running on two different fronts. How does Trump play into all of that? I've been watching to see kind of how other Republicans are reacting to this news, not reacting to it, or going about their daily lives with it. And it's interesting to look at some of those potential 2024 candidates, people like Nikki Haley, who is in New York. The UN is going on right now. She's been trying to get out on that issue. You have Glenn Youngkin, for example, the Republican governor of Virginia. He's out on the campaign trail. Ted Cruz.
Trump, or are they kind of sidestepping Trump?
You know, it's one of those things where when you talk about these investigations, you saw all of them kind of rally to his defense, but they're still kind of making their own moves because, as you and I have talked about before, this is so uncertain how this all plays out. And so they kind of want to be ready in the wings in case he doesn't run, in case, the midterms don't pan out well for Republicans and Trump gets blamed in some way. So it's interesting to kind of watch their movements. They're kind of going about it as if they're preparing their own futures, but not enough to kind of cross him.
That's a good point. And Finn, I think so much about Governor Youngkin of Virginia. He reminds me of Chris Christie back in 2011 when Christie was the Republican star of the moment. People wanted to try to recruit him to run in the donor class to run in 2012. He ultimately decided not to run for the Republican nomination that year. But Finn, you brought up an interesting point about how Trump remains the dominant force. Voters' minds haven't changed. There's a new poll out today from the New York Times and Siena College, and it says the American public's views of Trump have remained remarkably stable in recent months, even as he faces multiple investigations. Overall, the Times wrote 44% of voters viewed him favorably, while 53% viewed him unfavorably, effectively unchanged since the last poll. That gets to your point, Finn, about these political dynamics where it's such a firestorm seemingly in the headlines on some of the Trump legal questions. But the polling shows, at least from CBS and the New York Times Siena today, that there are other issues that are crowding out this story.
Absolutely. I just want to make one quick point, Bob, actually. Earlier this summer, when you mentioned Youngkin, I remember earlier this summer when Trump first came to Washington, it was the first time he came back since he left office. I ran into a senior Trump advisor who his first question out of his mouth is, how real is Youngkin? So I think Youngkin is having an impact even in Trump world, and you're seeing that with Youngkin. When it comes to Trump, there's still also, like I mentioned, there's this wait-and-see approach, not only inside the Republican Party, but also in Trump world. They're watching and seeing how these investigations will play out and how it will, the trajectory of Donald Trump looking past 22, how this impacts that as well. So, I mean, even though the polling has not changed in recent months, some are still seeing that there could be some significant impact in that trajectory that we've mentioned.
And let's not forget, Caitlin, that Trump world is not just monitoring the legal and political things at play right now. This is a movement that has, in recent weeks, recent months, recent years, been cozying up in some respects to the QAnon conspiracy movement. The former president has amplified the QAnon movement on his social media platform. At recent rallies, you see a lot of QAnon movement supporters attending Trump rallies as well. What are we witnessing on that right wing of the Republican Party inside the Trump movement right now when it comes to QAnon and extremism? Yeah,
well, you mentioned that Trump is not only kind of, giving some dog whistles. I mean, there are overt symbols. You mentioned this rally in Pennsylvania, for example, that he had last weekend. And what I think is interesting, too, is to kind of watch whether and how other Republicans engage in that behavior or try to kind of stay away from it. If you look at someone like Doug Mastriano, who we've talked about before, running for governor in Pennsylvania, he's very much, tied to that and embracing that.
So he's not embracing QAnon necessarily, but he's seen as someone supportive of kind of Christian nationalism.
Yes.
His Christianity is at the forefront of how he's framing his own Republican candidacy.
But when you look at kind of the conspiracy nature of QAnon, there's that element, but there's kind of this broader sense in the Republican Party of not to disavow it too much among some of these candidates who are loyal to Trump.
Finn, any thoughts on what we're witnessing with some of these elements out there on the campaign trail?
I think, as you mentioned, you saw Trump in that rally actively embracing the supporters of the QAnon conspiracy. He recently shared an illustration on his social media platform during that rally, and even played that music that was maybe a hat tip to the QAnon conspiracy. You even saw that strange hand gesture, which could have been part of that as well. But it's something where he could be doing this to overtly court them in a way. He recognizes that there may be there is an element in his base. Not sure how significant the size of it, but it does exist, and it's sort of a hat tip to them that memes that he puts out that are it's in essence trying to say that I see you and I see that you're there and that you support me.
And when we talk about what will break through in the midterm elections, Caitlin, there's a lot of talk about whether the January 6th committee, which had these hearings in recent months, will break through with its own work. Next week, there's going to be a hearing on September 28th, 1 p.m. Our colleague Scott McFarland spoke earlier today with one of the committee members, Jamie Raskin of Maryland. Let's listen.
The committee announced another hearing. You spent a lot of time over the last few weeks working behind the scenes. Why is it important to have another public, nationally televised hearing?
There were some loose ends that we wanted to wrap up from the prior hearings, including the disappearance of thousands of texts in the Secret Service and in the Department of Defense. There's some other lingering questions.
What are you going to be watching with the January 6 hearings? Because we all have been paying attention to Trump legal, the grand juries in Washington, the Georgia grand jury, but it's the January 6 committee ultimately that's going to be out front in the spotlight.
Yeah, I mean, what has been so fascinating about the committee is that we've all known about, what happened on January 6th, right? But what the committee has been able to unveil is that they've been able to talk to Republicans and feature Republicans, people who worked in the Trump administration, who wanted him to win again. And they have, the information that they have brought forth has been very revealing. But the bigger question is, does this have any political consequences for the former president or his supporters? And I don't think that we've seen that yet. And that's why I'm watching to see kind of what the results of the midterms are, because he has endorsed lots of candidates this cycle. A lot of them have been successful. If they are not successful in the general election, does that give Republicans pause to say, okay, maybe we should look at some of these other candidates in the wings, DeSantis, Haley, and another person. And that's why it's really interesting to just watch what other Republicans are doing, because there is a lot, a lot of Republicans have bashed this committee, have tried to say from the start that it's political. But if it turns out that something happens from one of these investigations, it's just a big unknown. So, whether this gives some other Republicans some room to kind of come to the forefront and say, I'm Trump, but without the baggage, that's kind of where the jockeying, I think, is.
Finn, any thoughts on January 6th? When I spoke to Vice President Harris a few months ago, she said democracy is the issue for the midterm elections. You stay close to the campaign committees in both parties. What are Democrats saying in the closing stretch about how they're going to talk about this?
Well, I mean, you see that when this next hearing comes out, it's going to be about 40 days until the November 8th election. So they're hoping that it does have an impact, that it does sway some of the independent voters. You're seeing some impact on register with them. But earlier in the summer, we did have a poll that showed that among Republicans and among the Trump's base, it really has not been having that impact, as Caitlin mentioned. So will it have an impact come 47 days? That's also something we are going to be watching and seeing if that helps sway some voters, especially in these crucial battleground states.
Caitlin Huey-Burns and Finn Gomez, thanks very much, and stick with us. And with just 47 days until the midterm elections, House Republicans are going to be rolling out their blueprint for taking back the House. We'll explain why leadership in the GOP is looking to the 90s for inspiration once we get back. You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgment of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
I'm here for you. Take an orange? Yes. You do? Here.
America needs drivers.
And we're here to help.
What are you learning from Girls on the Run?
Never give up and to always keep trying.
If I'm a parent in your state, I'm like, what's Congress doing? Beyond this gate is actually the border with Ukraine.
We've seen people not just opening their hearts to Ukrainian refugees, but their homes.
Where will you go?
Nobody says it like Gail.
If we can't talk about it and we can't make changes, when can we talk about it?
Gail King, CBS Mornings. Everything your morning should be.
When weather turns extreme.
The 150-mile-per-hour hurricane is still churning north.
Every second counts.
Massive and rapidly intensifying.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
CBS News and extreme weather. Feel the forecast.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me?
We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Robert Costa. Speaking of Trump, one of his top allies, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, is rolling out the House GOP agenda today. It's his version of what Speaker Newt Gingrich did in 1994 before he became Speaker with the contract with America. So this is an echo of sorts of that political moment. For more on this, CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian joins us now from Capitol Hill. And we still have with us Caitlin Huey-Burns here at the desk, and Finn Gomez, our political director. Nicole, thanks for joining us. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area tomorrow. Kevin McCarthy has his debut with his own version of a contract with America type document. What are we going to see from House Republicans?
Yeah, that's right. Well, the leader will be joined by a number of House Republicans just outside of the Pittsburgh area, where he is expected to announce House Republicans' midterm agenda, which is dubbed the Commitment to America. In fact, House Republicans were briefed on that plan earlier today on Capitol Hill. I caught up with the leader and asked him for a preview.
What can we expect from your announcement tomorrow, sir?
Well, you're going to get a plan for a new direction for America. It's a commitment to America, rolling out to the American public that they would trust us. These are what we believe put America back on the right track. The economy that's strong, make us energy independent, cut inflation. We'd have a nation that's safe. You know what's happening across this country, secure our border.
So as you heard from the leader there will be a lot of emphasis on trying to strengthen the economy, on security when it comes to the border, as well as dealing with a number of other issues, whether that's free speech, whether that's the issue of government oversight and accountability. Now, one thing I did ask the leader after that question there is how many seats he thinks he can pick up in the House if Republicans take control. He wouldn't put a number on it, just saying that he hopes that they can pick up as many seats as they can. But I also put that same question to former Speaker Newt Gingrich, who was also here on the Hill briefing members. And as you mentioned, Bob was a key architect of the contract with America back in 1994. Here are his projections. How many seats do you think House Republicans can pick up?
Oh, they're somewhere between 15 and 70.
70?
Depends. If people think about the grocery store, think about the gas station, think about the evening news reports on murders and rapes and robberies, the Democrats have a huge, huge problem.
So the former speaker obviously very bullish on Republicans' chances here in the House. And, you know, what he pointed out was back in 94, he kept referencing this Time magazine article that, kind of underrated Republican chances. And in turn, Republicans ended up flipping the chamber, picking up more than 50 seats. So he feels relatively confident that Republicans will do well, even as we see these projections that show some shrinkage in the margins for House Republicans this fall.
Nicole, stay with us. Really appreciate your reporting on all of this. Finn, when you look back to 1994, Gingrich, as a House Republican leader at the time, was really out front for the GOP in the close of the '94 midterms. This time around, I would argue as a reporter, former President Trump is much more known nationally by Republicans. How does that relationship between Trump and McCarthy play out as the House Republicans debut this plan?
Well, as you know, Bob, the relationship with Trump and with McCarthy is a close one, and you're right. I mean, Newt Gingrich in 1994, 28 years ago, was seen as the architect of this Republican revolution that led the Republicans to unify both houses for the first time in over 50 years. But unlike 1994, where Republicans won a net gain of 54 seats, our projections show that Republicans are looking at a net gain of approximately 12 seats. So not quite as historic, and that could be in part because of Donald Trump, and in part because of some of the sort of impact he's had during this cycle. Early on, Trump was weighing a decision to whether to jump into the 24 race early before the midterms, and it was McCarthy who was one of the people who told him not to, because it would be a referendum on Trump. But with all the headlines and maybe some of the fact that he is the standard bearer for the Republican Party, he is in many ways has become that in some of these crucial battleground states and congressional districts. So it's something to watch, and there is a difference between Newt Gingrich in '94 and Donald Trump in 2022.
Caitlin, what about the closing message from Democrats this time around?
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot working against them, right? They're campaigning as the party in power, right? The midterms are typically a referendum on the party in power. But I think what's different this time around is June 24th, the day that the Supreme Court decision came down. A lot of Democrats I talked to say that is something that flipped the dynamic. Now, whether it does, in fact, sustain themselves through the midterms remains to be seen. But what's interesting I've seen over the past couple of weeks is that Democrats are not only counting on abortion, but they're also going and kind of talking to some of their vulnerabilities. I'm thinking about crime. Here in Washington, we've seen a lot of ads in Virginia. So Abigail Spanberger, for example, she's running ads talking about her law enforcement connections, talking about those credentials, kind of taking that on. I've done a lot of reporting in Maryland as well, where that was a big issue in the governor's race. So there are, to Gingrich's point when he was talking about to Nicole, they know they have to combat these high prices, the issue of crime, and we'll see if they're able to take that on.
And real quick, Nicole, before we let you go, we know you're busy up on Capitol Hill. The Senate Republicans have had a lot of tension on their own message between Senator Rick Scott of Florida, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. How does that contrast with what you're seeing with the House GOP?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was one of the things coming out of this briefing here on Capitol Hill, whether it was Newt Gingrich or the leader, Kevin McCarthy, and even other members suggesting that, their members are unified behind this message. As you know, there are different entities within the Republican conference, such as the Freedom Caucus, and, the leader suggesting that he didn't hear any pushback from that particular caucus. So, from that standpoint, they are trying to project a sense of unity, which would contrast with what we've seen in the Senate, where there has been this clear divide, as you mentioned, between the minority leader and the NRSC chair, Rick Scott.
Nicole Killian, thank you. Caitlin Huey-Burns, Finn Gomez, you'll be right back with us. And when we come back, a look at what will drive politics next week, including how immigration is affecting voters in Republican Governor Ron DeSantis' home state. Stay with us. You are streaming Red and Blue.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgment of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
I'm here for you. Take an orange? Yes. You do? Here.
America needs drivers.
And we're here to help.
What are you learning from Girls on the Run?
Never give up and to always keep trying.
If I'm a parent in your state, I'm like, what's Congress doing?
Beyond this gate is actually the border with Ukraine.
We've seen people not just opening their hearts to Ukrainian refugees, but their homes.
Where will you go?
Nobody says it like Gail.
If we can't talk about it and we can't make changes, when can we talk about it?
Gail King, CBS Mornings. Everything your morning should be.
When weather turns extreme.
The 150-mile-per-hour hurricane is still churning north.
Every second counts.
Massive and rapidly intensifying.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
CBS News and extreme weather. Feel the forecast.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Robert Costa. I want to bring back our colleagues one more time to wrap up our show with a look at what's going to drive political news, political reporting next week. Caitlin Huey-Burns and Finn Gomez both here with us. Finn, what's on your mind? What's in your notebook?
I think what's going to happen is that what we're seeing is that Republicans are going to further try to move the conversation topics, the issue of illegal immigration. They think that's something they can win on, and it's something they can counter on the inroads that Democrats have made since the Dobbs decision. So you're going to see more on illegal immigration. They're going to be talking more about that both on the campaign trail and on Capitol Hill.
And what are you hearing, Finn, about Florida Governor Ron DeSantis?
Yeah, Ron DeSantis, as you know, got into a bit of controversy by sending migrants, most of them whom were from Venezuela, from Florida to Martha's Vineyard. Right? There's been some political blowback on that, especially on the Democratic side, and from his Democratic rival Charlie Crist, who is running against him for the governor's race in Florida. Democrats see an opening there. They see a political opening to go after the Venezuelan voters in Florida. It's a community that has grown exponentially in the last 20 years since the rise of Hugo Chavez and then Nicolas Maduro, his handpicked successor in Venezuela. And they've become politically more powerful because those migrants were Venezuelan, mostly Venezuelan. Democrats see that that they can change perhaps the support from DeSantis to them.
We'll keep a close eye on that. Caitlin, what are you watching?
Well, I'm heading to North Carolina next week. There's a really interesting Senate race that has really flown under the radar between Sherry Beasley, who, if elected as a Democrat, she would be the first African-American woman, or one of two, not the first, but in her state. But what's interesting about North Carolina is that we've been talking about the politics of abortion, whether an abortion access, whether this is actually going to move voters. I think this will be a really big test case for that, because North Carolina is really the only state in the South right now that isn't proposing restrictions to abortion. So it's become a haven, and clinics that we've talked to have said that they've seen an influx of people coming from surrounding states to North Carolina. So is this something that can move the needle in the Democrats' favor in that kind of state? Republicans that I've been talking to there say the economy and inflation remain the same, driving voters on the issue. So I think that will be a good test case of those two dynamics we were talking about earlier.
We'll keep watching all these important issues. Caitlin Huey-Burns, political correspondent here at CBS, and Finn Gomez, our political director. Thank you so much for joining us for our whole program. And that does it for today. I'll be in Austin tomorrow interviewing Congressman Raskin at the Texas Tribune Festival, and we hope to see you here next week when we'll be streaming Red and Blue Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of our program, you can see them anytime on our CBS News website. Just go to cbsnews.com/redandblue.
Original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction.